Hello and welcome to Delta College Impact. I'm Roger Waller, your host for today's program. And today we're going to be talking about Delta's connection with the world, specifically zeroing in on China. And joining me for this program, I have two of our Delta College faculty. On my immediate left is Dr. Elizabeth Blanchard, the chair of our psychology department here at Delta. And to Liz's left is Dr. Rosaline Fung. And Rosaline is a member of our communication skills department. Welcome to the program, and I have to really jump right into our topic, which is Delta's connection with China. And I know both of you are closely connected with China. And Liz, we might as well start with you. And I know that you were born in Hong Kong, but moved to San Francisco, but you've gone back to Hong Kong a lot.
Yes.
What's your history with your trips back to Hong Kong?
Mostly socially, and because I have no family in Hong Kong anymore, so it was mostly wanting to touch back with the roots and see the changes. And every time I go back to Hong Kong, there's some changes because we don't stop in Hong Kong. We go on into inner China and on, and that's where the fascination starts.
And I know you go back on a regular basis.
Yes.
It's not like you just have been back once. You go back about how
We've
often?
been back about 10 times.
Terrific. And I know, Rosaline, you were also born in Hong Kong and spent up to your first 18 years living in Hong Kong before coming to the United States. But how often do you get back to Hong Kong and China?
I try to go back twice a year. My father still lives there. He is 84 years old and gives me an opportunity to spend some good time with him. In addition to actually watching Hong Kong change, which is most exciting at this stage.
And I know that's really one of the topics we want to talk about today is both Liz and Rosaline had a tremendous opportunity to observe the transition of Hong Kong from British rule to going back to control of mainland China. And a lot of us may have looked at this wondering what was the feelings of the people in Hong Kong, and Liz and Rosaline had the chance of being there. And Liz, let's begin with you. Now, you were there right on the day. And was there a lot of anxiety going on in Hong Kong before the transition?
If you define anxiety as mixed feelings, yes, because the Hong Kongese didn't know if going back to mainland China is going to make drastic changes in the economics. They're more about economics than they are in politics. And the other anxiety is how much directions will mainland China pass on down that they're not accustomed to. So I think from an outside point of view, I would have to say, because I don't have relatives and I didn't grow up in Hong Kong, the outside point of view, and we interviewed dozens of people from different social, economic level. And the main theme was, we can handle changes. And there was not the fear, it was just the uncertainty of changes. But there was no fear of going back to the hands of mainland China.
Now, Rosaline, I know you were there as a child and had a chance to really grow up in that system. Now, as your father is looking at this transition back, did he sense greater apprehension about going back to a communist rule from being more of a capitalistic system?
I think because father has lived so long, he knows how to weather things, and he really believes that Hong Kong and the Hong Kong people would weather this very well. And indeed, Hong Kong did, and so did the people. These people are not into politics as such. Indeed, we talk about freedom and we talk about democracy, but to these people, the economy is the most important thing. And regardless of what the political environment is, these people really do believe that they can make it, that they are resilient enough to take any of these changes. And as history has shown, we are into the middle of the year, actually. almost a year come June. And of course, the economical changes have actually surfaced, but not because of the changes. At least they don't think so. The people think that these changes have come because of the
whole Pacific Rim
the
area.
Pacific Rim area. That's right.
Because Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, they're all hurting. And so it's not a singular country in the Pacific Rim that is suffering. So they can't say it's the return to mainland China that's caused this change.
Okay, so there is not the perception of a ripple effect of this transition affecting other economies in Southeast Asia and the Asian area. Now, one of the things that was said was that the probability is that Hong Kong would change China more than China would change Hong Kong, just because of some of these economic implications. What are your thoughts on that?
I really feel that China was ready for change before the handover. In fact, I think Rosaline and I have heard from people telling us over and over again when we were back there, China's been working with Hong Kong over this handover for 5-6 years before the actual ceremony. So it was nothing surprising that that's going to be that many surprises. There were no surprises. The only surprise, I think, was when they had the labor union come out and demonstrated that they didn't want any labor rights change. But that was such a small group. And the media, of course, zero in on it. But the major population says, oh, well, you know, the changes will come, whether it's Chinese dominated or British dominated, you have to expect changes.
Well, we're going to take a look at our local media, because when Liz was visiting in China, she had the opportunity to take some photographs. And one of the things I think some of us may not be familiar with is where Hong Kong lies in relationship to the vast country of China. It's located in the southeast part of China. And what's the weather like? Is it very mild throughout the year in Hong Kong?
You've been there longer than I have, Rosaline.
Actually, it's very hot and humid in the summer.
And so no snow, I would imagine.
No snow.
Now, one of the things that we see in this shot, Liz, is what's the building on the lower left in our screen?
That's brand new built pavilion just for the purpose of the handover ceremony. So Prince Charles and his group, Madeleine Albright was there, but she didn't stay. Our U.S. representative.
And so that's where the transition actually
occurred.
Now, looking at these large buildings, it almost reminds us here of New York versus, you know, our image of maybe mainland China or Hong Kong. Now, in those offices, are they primarily financial organizations, or who is it that actually resides in all these skyscrapers?
You know, I think Rosaline can probably know the tenants of the Hong Kong buildings better than I.
Those are probably the offices of the big corporations that are stationed in Hong Kong. Some of them are 50-50 ventures, and others are Chinese corporations that have moved down to Hong Kong. You're looking at the central part of Hong Kong right now, and the residential area is not here. It's much too expensive for people to live in this particular area.
Now those flags we have there, the flag on the right, I guess, is
the Hong Kong new flag. They designed it just for the handover ceremony, which they will use from now on just for Hong Kong, like the California flag. It's a flower, and it's called the Bohemian flower.
And is that native of China?
Native Hong Kong.
Native of Hong Kong.
That's the new gate that they erected just for the ceremony, and thousands of people every day, every night go through those gates to this marina area, which is right across from the pavilion, to watch the fireplaces.
And so that's how it appears at night?
It's beautiful at night, isn't it, Rosaline?
Yes, this is so typical of what the Hong Kong people like to do for celebrations. They like to build pavilions, and they would light them up. And the people of Hong Kong would go and walk on the promenades and look at the lights across the bay.
And this tiger, is this a
This is
dragon?
a dragon.
a symbol of strength, longevity.
Did they have ceremonies like, I guess it was at New Year's, but they had ceremonies that was really celebrating not only New Year's, but I guess celebrating the transition.
Well, the transition was very expensive. I think Rosaline was telling me they spent 1 billion with a B Hong Kong dollar just on the fireworks. So it's a 7 Hong Kong dollar to 1 US dollar. So you translate, that's a lot of money. Yeah.
Now, this gentleman on the right is very well connected to Delta College, Liz. You might mention who that
That's
is.
President Joe Blanchard, Emeritus of Delta College, and he's the one who really is the historian of Chinese history, and he likes to go back every year and see the changes. And he's the one who does all the note-taking and the taping and the interviewing, and I just am the secretary.
Now, this is not Hong Kong.
This is
but-
Shanghai, and I wanted to share this with you because that was all wasteland at one time. Nothing, it was just flat. And within 5 years, this is what you see. They have the most advanced communication center now in Shanghai. Foreign power governed Shanghai for many centuries, and now the Shanghaiese themselves are very proud that they are in full control of their own corporation and own land and own economic.
It's amazing. Now, one of the questions I had is, as you mentioned that they erected this gate, and it sort of reminded me of the gate as someone enters Chinatown in San Francisco, which a lot of our viewers are maybe familiar with. Now, is a gate sort of a traditional transition from one area to another, or what was the purpose of erecting that gate to honor the transition?
The gates were actually built at the edge of cities, and they were really gates into the city. So I suppose in ancient China it was an indication of where the city actually starts, the boundary of the city. And of course, for this event, you can see how it can be symbolic of so many things, walking into a new era, into a new future, under the rule of China again, or the motherland.
Now, as you look at that celebration that occurred, and the $1 billion spent on fireworks, I would imagine that's going to be an impression that will remain with you forever, obviously. Now, what was the most memorable part of that transition?
I think I cried when I saw the flags being changed. Not that it was British or Communist China. It was just that the flag changing is symbolic, so symbolic of such a legacy from there on for future generation that, I don't know, it just impressed me as this is the symbol of change, really, that hit me hard.
Rosaline, what do you remember about that day?
Actually, the flag changing also hit me rather hard. I remember days when I was growing up that that we listened to God Save the Queen because because of the British rule. And so to see the British flag come down really did mark an era. And lots of question marks, although people believed that everything would be okay, we still had we had our doubts, and we do wonder what will actually happen. But in the hearts of the people, however, all the people I talked to, they were so sure that everything would be okay. The people that did not leave, that is. Of course, there have been a lot of people who did leave Hong Kong. And ironically, many of those have gone back to make a living.
That's true.
Well, you know, that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about is not only how the transition has impacted Hong Kong, but the connections to Delta College that Liz and Rosaline have been able to bring back to our programs here at Delta. And we'll be talking about that on the second half of the program after these brief public service messages. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after these brief messages. Hello and welcome back to Delta College Impact. I'm Roger Waller, your host for today's program. And on the first half of the program, we talked about China and the connection that two of our faculty members have with China and the transition of Hong Kong from British rule to communist Chinese rule. We talked about the impressiveness of that transition and the impact that it had on people living in Hong Kong and people who've been associated with Hong Kong. On the second half of the program, we're going to be talking about some of the additional connections between China and the Delta College programs. And to do that, we're joined by our two faculty members who were with us on the first half of the program, Dr. Elizabeth Blanchard of our psychology department and Dr. Rosaline Fung of our communication skills department. And Liz, let's start with you. And now one of the interesting things is in the psychology department, we have a terrific certificate in gerontology. And before we talk about the Chinese connection, you might talk a little bit about that gerontology certificate.
It's a brand new certificate, and we felt that with the baby boomers coming on and being the next group of seniors, we felt that we need to train people to be caregivers rather than to go out in the street and hire anybody. And also, too, more and more families are being what we call the sandwich population, where they have to take care of their young children and the senior parent or grandparents. And we're beginning to see more and more sandwiched population that are overwhelmed. They're so stressed out. So we're providing formalized training to train caregivers to give families some relief, and then also to be prepared to go on to do professional work. And there's a great demand, and because the industry is growing.
And I know that's really one of the keys as you look at our programs here at Delta, is trying to stay up with changes in our communities. Right. Now, one of the things that we do look at is the connections to other areas. And it's interesting, the textbook that you're using in one of your courses really relates back to China. In what way?
I think the two authors were back in China, and they were observing how the Chinese were taking care of their Chinese.
And that's the front cover, The Psychology of Aging, by Lester Lee and Richard Lee. And
they both are very, very respectful of seniors in China, because they found that in China the seniors were the bulwark of the family, and yet when they look at American seniors, we pretty much warehouse some of our seniors, and they decided that they'll put their observations together and try to put a caregiver textbook to guide people how to take care of elders. And I thought with their perspective and straddling, because they're both educated in America, of course, but they're straddling two culture, might give us an objective point of view, not good or bad, but just a blend of that caregiver's consideration. And so I felt that was a good text for me to use.
Oh, no, that's terrific. Now, one of the things, as you've put together the certificate here at Delta College, what are some of the components that went into your gerontology
Well,
program?
they have to take individual counseling, group counseling, family counseling, and they also have to have psychology involved and some sociology. And the certificate involves counseling skills, working particularly specifically with elderlies. Because when you counsel young people and middle-aged people, it's very different than working with the elderly. And the other one is just to understand the physiological demands and changes of senior as we grow old. And I keep reminding students they are growing old every day themselves, and to understand the limitations as you reach a certain age. So to understand the physiological, psychological changes and sociological changes that comes along from society, so they can understand where the elders are coming from when they become the caregiver.
Now, is there any internship component of the program?
Definitely. They're supposed to do community service as a volunteer before they can get their certificate.
Terrific. Well, that sounds exciting, and that's a great opportunity for people in our community to get some of this additional training. Well, Rosaline, let's talk a little bit about your books that you've written, because one of your assignments here at Delta College is to help teach some of the English as Second Language courses. And I know you looked at that program, and you're the author of how many books now?
6.
6 books dealing with teaching English as a second language. And what's the general philosophy that you've taken in your books?
I feel that learning a second language takes a lot of practice and pattern practice in particular. And actually, it's a system that most institutes of language would use. And I use it in all my books. Actually, my books are not only for ESL students, they are also for basic skills learners. And they are being used at Delta College by our basic skills courses as well as our ESL courses.
And I think that's a great point, because you really, it's sort of titled Patterns for Success. And one of the things when you talk about patterns for success, that's really zeroing in on people's writing skills.
Yes, writing skills, composition skills. I actually start with sentence mastery. Writing is the most demanding form of language, and to have sentence mastery means to have a building block to write anything you care to write. And so that's where I start. And my series is actually called Patterns for Success, taking the mystery out of writing. And I do just that. I try at least to take the mystery out of writing.
And one of the keys I know is that you had to deal with this yourself as you were learning English as a second language in Hong Kong. Now, you not only learned English, but you also learned to read and write in Chinese. Now, is that a difficult transition to go from writing and readings in a symbol-based language to using the alphabet?
Perhaps in a way it is not a difficult thing to do, because those were two separate skills. So I just learned the first one, and then I learned the second one that dealt with the alphabet. However, it gave me a lot of memory practice because I learned a simple symbol-based language. And that's what I really believe in. In my Patterns for Success, I believe that the students who need to learn a second language or a third language need to learn the structure in patterns, and that's what I teach in my books.
Now, one of the arguments is that if you're just doing that memorization, might not that be boring to a student to keep going over and over the same issues?
Let me point out that it is not really memorization of patterns as such. It is doing these patterns so often that they become habitual and natural. We do not really test students on, say, pattern A or pattern B. We ask them to write them so that they would become their repertoire of sentence structures and then call on these structures whenever they need to express themselves well. And so the structures become very functional and natural rather than a memorized way of learning.
So it really still gives that student the opportunity to develop their own innovative ways of presenting ideas, but using the patterns of the language that they've learned.
That's right, within the limits of the patterns. And language is by nature repetitive. Without the repetition and the patterns, we would not be speaking, we would not be here today communicating with one another. And so keeping that in mind, I like to think that it is not really boring to learn the structures. It is boring, however, to be asked to do something that you don't know how to do. And having been given these structures, the students actually know what to do, and they can succeed and do them well.
And I know one of your points is that a lot of people are not reading as much as they used to today. They're watching television, and learning to write may be involving a lot more pattern skill development.
That's exactly true, Roger. When you think about learning a language, you should really think of reading, because that's how we perfect our language skills. But most of our students, most of our youngsters today do not really read. And without the reading, they cannot learn language skills through osmosis. And so they will have to, one way or another, learn it through patterns.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Well, one of the things I hope we've all gained from this program is that Delta College is connected to the world. And one of the connections is an outstanding one with China. And we learned a lot about that connection today from our discussions with Dr. Blanchard and Dr. Fung. Well, some of you may be interested in following up on this program. And if you're interested in contacting Dr. Elizabeth Blanchard here at Delta College, our address here at Delta is 5151 Pacific Avenue here in Stockton, zip code 95207. And Dr. Blanchard's phone number is area code 209-954-5223. And if you'd like to contact Dr. Fung, she's also here at the Delta College address, and her telephone number again is area code 209-954-5595. They both would be very happy to talk to you about their programs and some of the exciting programs that we offer here at Delta College to help you not only in their areas but in a variety of other areas here at Delta. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our program, and I want to thank Dr. Blanchard and Dr. Fung for joining us. I'm sure you're looking forward to your next trip back to Hong Kong to see how the transition has turned out.
Yes, we are.
And we want to have you return to a future Delta College Impact program. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.